Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, it's been some time since I've done a Chris Watts video. I think it is warranted. A new Discovery Plus documentary has come out, Chris Watts, a Faking It special, and I'll put a link in the description for the article about it from the Daily Mail, which contains two clips from two different experts. So you can check out what they say there. This video is essentially a response to both of those experts cited in the video in terms of the what they say in those video clips. This is really just a response to that. I've obviously not retired from covering the Chris Watts case. I'm just taking a break. I think I'll probably be back with more consistent coverage around about June. But I will be covering news as it arises. I didn't really think covering Chris Watts' birthday I didn't really see any point in that, celebrating his birthday. I know an article did come out in People saying something about he's very isolated, that he doesn't really have many friends, and that he's sort of on quite a low tier, even in terms of the prison population. If you're new to the channel, there are quite a few Chris Watts related playlists with plenty of content on this channel. Just click on the playlist tab on this channel. The Chris Watts playlist has got over 201 videos, and then there's also hashtag 2 years ago today CW series dealing with the phone data review, that's got 43 videos, crime scene evidence 15 videos, audiobook excerpts 10, and then 10 what the F's in the Chris Watts case 11 videos, so check those out. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So, Discovery Plus, they brought out a documentary. It's called Chris Watts, a Faking It special. Have any of you seen it? They are a little bit late to the party, aren't they? Are we coming up on the 3-year anniversary, and it does seem that everything that can be taken apart in the Chris Watts case, all the analysis that can possibly be done has been done. But there is some merit in the documentary. There's sort of some good and some bad, and let's start with the good. One pretty obvious thing from the Sermon on the Porch that is perhaps underemphasized is that the bouquet of words aren't matched by appropriate voice tone or expressions. In other words, he makes all the right noises, he says all the right things to some extent, but expresses what he is communicating very poorly. A simple example is when he says, "I miss them," while smiling. This corresponds globally to what we have known about the Watts family and the enormous Watts home on Saratoga Trail all along. It's all about appearances. But there's another word for it too. Insincerity, and I think the one body language analyst uses it. That's a word not often used that means the quality of not expressing genuine feelings. And I think that is such a accurate description of the whole American Murder, the family next door vibe. It is a quality of not expressing genuine feelings. It's not just Chris Watts though, it's beyond that. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But let's apply it to Chris Watts. Did Watts ever know how to express his feelings? I mean, he even had to Google when to tell someone you're falling in love and how do you know if you're falling in love. And these are synonyms for insincerity, hypocrisy, deceitfulness, pretense, double dealing, fraud, phoniness, affectation, and of course just lying. The Watts case feels like an American exhibit of phoniness, especially through social media, not only in terms of the Watts family, but also much of the aftermath where creators have gotten onto the bandwagon and profited from their own insincerity. It's quite an irony, a mob of people calling the kettle black, meanwhile the creators leading them on doing something much different than Watts was, and yet their followers can't see it. That feels like a big part of the disturbing post-truth of the Watts case, and I've written a book on that called Silver Fox Post-Truth. The Watts family probably got away with superficial aphorisms and fake smiles and fake gestures on social media all the time. But true crime imposes a far stricter standard on these performances, and Watts was found in super quick time, I mean virtually immediately. As we know, he failed all his lie detector tests, meaning with the media via the Sermon on the Porch, with the CBI via Agent Tammy Lee's polygraph. When he spoke to Coda didn't believe him. He said, that sounds like horse shit, and he was basically just saying, I don't believe you. Let's go through it again. From the FBI, that was on Tuesday night. Giving his original version of events to Frederick PD officer Coonrod. Coonrod didn't believe him, leading Coonrod to summon Detective Baumhover. Baumhover didn't believe him either, which led to the interview on Tuesday night. And, of course, he failed to convince his neighbor, which is why Tranastich said something like, he ain't acting right to Coonrod. He failed to convince Nicole Atkinson. He even failed to convince her teenage son, which is why Nicholas sort of dived into the sofa and was looking around for incriminating evidence and actually found Shanann's phone. So in the documentary, at least the female expert on this is on point, talking about the mismatch between the words and the appearance or the expressions or the tone of his voice. But what about this dude talking about Watts's baseline? Now, I've actually heard that come up from quite a lot of YouTube creators that are apparently experts in body language analysis, right? They talk about baseline. And I must say, most of the time when I hear that, I kind of, my eyes roll. He says that this is Watts's baseline during the interview, this image of Watts. Do you agree with that? I mean, it sounds terribly sophisticated talking about baseline. It feels like something out of Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, doesn't it?
You're not even close to baseline.
Now, the way Constant K, as he's referred to in the movie, is sort of assessed is he does the same test over and over again over a long period of time. And an anomaly is detected when he gravitates or fluctuates away from this baseline test. Now, the point being, he's done lots of tests when things are kind of normal, right? So out of his normal life. And so when there's a fluctuation, that is what is off baseline, right? Now, I'll put a link to the clip you've just heard in the description so you can see it for yourself. But the thing is, hours after committing triple murder, this is Chris Watts, while appearing on camera with cadaver dogs barking in the background and cops jogging through his house, he's hardly going to provide anything even close to Watts's baseline. You can't take a scenario like that and say, we're going to get a baseline out of that. It's literally like in the clip that I've just provided, where the guy is off baseline saying, well, we're going to take baseline out of off baseline and compare it to what needs to be his baseline. It just doesn't make any sense, right? So Tranastich said as much about Watts that entire day. So, we see Watts minute by minute in the body cam footage, and you can see he's not on baseline the way we know him. He's fidgeting, he's swaying from left to right, he's talkative, and he's just not, things are definitely off baseline on that Tuesday, right? And I don't even think you needed to know Chris Watts very well to figure that out. What you did need to know was realize the extent that he was sort of acting weird, because it could be that he just had a little argument with his family, or that there was some perhaps domestic abuse, right, in terms of a hypothetical. But if he was far off his baseline, that could mean something different. And so you needed to really get to know who is the real Chris Watts, right? So how do we get a baseline? It's actually quite difficult. You don't just look at a clip like the Sermon on the Porch and then find the baseline in it. You don't just sort of snap your fingers and you've got baseline from an image. That's not how it works. It's difficult, but it is to some extent intuitive. I think some people have a knack for it and some people just don't. some people can look at someone who's off baseline and just not see anything. It does take time and effort to get to know a brand new suspect thoroughly, properly, and accurately from scratch. Bear in mind, whether you're a law enforcement person or an investigator or a true crime author, whenever you're dealing with a new case, you're getting to know a possible perpetrator from scratch. And so it's quite a long process getting to know them, seeing lots of pictures of them, seeing lots of footage, if you possibly can, of them, getting their backstory, getting their background. And we're trying to do this right now in the Barry Morphew case. We're trying to get a handle on who Barry Morphew is, what is the baseline of this guy, right? So it takes time to dig for that information, but also not get sucked into confirmation bias. You don't want to be looking at the information and then misinterpreting it constantly because you already made up your mind. You've got to let their identity speak for themselves. One has to ask friends and family especially, but often those are the most reluctant to speak honestly about what these people are really like and perhaps how they've changed. But friends and family are going to give you a sense of what is normal, given but you're still dealing with necessarily subjective opinions. So something from the discovery that I think is quite interesting, that is showing that Watts is off baseline, just in a general sense, is where one of the officers calls him and says in his report that, I made contact with Christopher. He did not ask me if I'd been calling because I had any information concerning his missing wife and daughters, or if I was calling because they had been found. So he's just through his interaction basically reporting something that is off baseline, if you want to use that jargon. Then he provides information, and then this is where he confirms for himself his gut feeling, which ends up being right. He says, at 4:38 a.m. I was contacted by Shanann's mother, Sandy, right? And she is upset in the same way that Chris Watts should be, and says that she suspects foul play in the same way that Watts should have. And she says she honestly believes that her son-in-law was involved in the disappearance. And then she says he's acting weird. It's out of the ordinary. She says that he's telling people he's got to go to work, and it just doesn't seem right. And she says something about she has a hunch that he's going to pour oil on the bodies to dispose of them. And she didn't really realize how right she was, right? But what is happening there is the officer directly has an experience with Watts where he thinks, you know what, you should be asking me about your family and you're not. And then Shanann's mother reinforces that through her knowledge of his behavior. Now, it's not to say that a family member, especially a mother-in-law, is going to be absolutely accurate, but it's very important to pay attention to what they're saying and then get as much background as you can from also other sources and then see if it starts to align. So in the Watts case, fortuitously, there were a bunch of people on hand to say directly and quickly that Watts performing to the cops just wasn't the man they knew. You had Trinastich, Nicole Atkinson, Nicholas Atkinson, you had, and then you also had Nicole Kessinger. And I know a lot of people have just dismissed what she says. You can't trust what she says, but in the discovery she says something about she saw the interview with Chris and his eyes looked different, and it looked like he did not have a soul. So she also found him off baseline intuitively. She says he looked like a different man, and that is very simple language for just saying this guy looks totally different. There's where there's smoke, there's fire, and there certainly was. So, we as the public, I think, suspected something was off, but not knowing why or the extent of it. So Watts isn't being honest, his emotions aren't quite right, but what does that mean? So someone close to him can point us in the right direction. Another way, of course, is to find to find a baseline is to try and find other footage of Watts, such as his video about relationships, right? And then get a sense. Another way is also to go through all of Shanann's social media and kind of get a sense of what's kind of in the background there. Again, I'm not 100% if that's really going to be baseline, because he's also awkward and he's sort of doing a spiel, right? You're more going to get it through word of mouth, through what people that know him are going to say, including people like Jeremy Lindstrom, right? Assuming that what they are saying is going to be sincere, assuming that they are not going to be on his side, that they're going to tell law enforcement a true and accurate thing, which not everyone that are closely related to a suspect might do, right? They might want to protect somebody, and you don't know that, which makes the whole process more complicated. But you want to get a sense, is the real Watts the suave, chuckly, and basically odd fellow that we saw on the Sermon on the Porch? And the answer was no. Most of the time, he wasn't really suave. He wasn't really that confident. He wasn't really that talkative. He was an introvert. Would you get the idea that Watts was an introvert from the Sermon on the Porch? I don't think so. That's the real Watts. So to better understand what we're talking about, take yourself. Think about your baseline. What is it? Why is it? Is the usual you the same as the you might project on a television interview? If so, good. You're congruent and authentic. If not, what are you hiding and why? And the same question applies to some of the creators on YouTube. Are they on their baselines? Are they projecting something on a television interview that's not sincere? If they're not congruent and not authentic, why not? What are they hiding and why? Something to think about. I'm probably going to come back to the Suzanne Morphew case dealing with the cancer narrative. Not a lot of people seem to be particularly interested in the last video I put up, but I do think it's a vital area. And someone who's had an experience of that, who had cancer and then divorced, obviously there was no crime in that case. I want to share her personal experience, and that might just provide shed a little bit more light on the importance and the impact of cancer in the Morphew case. For those who are perhaps more familiar with other channels and channels talking about Chris Watts not acting alone, if you go to my title video on my homepage on YouTube, I did a live stream debunking that, just talking about why, all the reasons, and there are many, why, and this is based on the discovery, it's based on what we know about Chris Watts, it's anchored in evidence and behavior, why Chris Watts didn't act alone. So if you want to challenge your thoughts on that particular subject, check it out. Again, if you haven't subscribed, you can click on the light blue icon on the bottom right, like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.